Sit right down and I'll show you where my dreams began.
I'm Michael Dugan, your culinary host, guiding you through the chef's journey. Join me at the chef's table, where you'll experience stories, secret sauces, signature dishes, and kitchen disasters. Today on the show, we welcome a young, aspiring chef, Olivia Kent Horton. What's special about Olivia is today, as we release this episode, April 2nd, 2022, it's her 17th birthday. She loves the culinary arts, cooking, gardening, and food deserts. And I'm so excited to dedicate this episode to Olivia. And Olivia, happy birthday and welcome to the show.
Hi, this is me.
Well, welcome, Olivia. So excited to have you here. I know we've been planning on this for a long time.
We have.
I can't wait to have this conversation with you. So let's get started. Let's take everyone back to when you were growing up. Now you're 16 now. So when you were 4 or 5, what did things look like? How were you connected to food?
Well, I just want to say when I was little, I was told that I used to eat everything. Like I was never picky. My parents would go, yeah, you'd eat this when you were little. Why don't you eat it now? And they would still do when I was 5. But I think the main thing I would bring up is cookbooks, specifically princess cookbooks. I loved Disney princesses. I loved Disney anything at the time. Anything that like all the princesses, the ballerinas, and they would have character books. I remember a specific Disney one, and it was Disney princess cookbooks. And I think it actually got me into a little bit of mixology too, because they had drinks in there. I would just pick.
What kind of drinks did they have?
Oh, non-alcoholic, I promise.
Sure.
It was like mixing seltzers. You can make coffee for your parents. And it was just so interesting to me because I would do like, I want to do this one today, Mom. Just this one. And then I want to do this one. And then I'd force my mom, if I couldn't do it, to make it for my lunch.
Okay.
To bring it with me the next day at school. It was my favorite thing, I remember. I think my favorite recipe was popcorn.
Popcorn. Tell us about that.
Yes. It was a popcorn with strawberry gelatin, butter, and sometimes cream cheese and marshmallows. And you would mix them together on low heat for a little while. Basically, it would come up with this sticky consistency that you would put on top of the popcorn. I think it was my favorite because it was almost always pink. But I never used to cook because on my other side of my family could do jam. They could like make homemade jam and bagels. And that just looked so confusing to me. I was like, no, I can't do it. So I would be with my popcorn just stirring on the stove, and then I'd put my pretty popcorn. We do confetti and holidays. I loved giving people holiday bowls of popcorn.
Okay.
They were a little sticky, but I think they taste good to this day.
And how old were you?
I think I had to be 5 to 7 because I just loved it. I would always be there on the stove cooking it.
Now, I know that your passion never died. So what happened after that?
After, I want to say it was middle school, my school had a cooking class and I couldn't join because I had already credits I needed to do. So I was like, you know what? That's fine. I'm going to cook at home. So I started looking up recipes and, the whole of Pinterest. I went down down the whole of Pinterest. I was seeing all these aesthetic foods. I wanted to make breakfast, learn how to make dinner for my family. It was also really good practice. For what I do today. I like to make dinner almost every night at my house.
So what were you cooking back then?
Pastas. I loved pastas. At the time, I wasn't a big seafood fan, and my parents like seafood, so I could cook seafood such as shrimp or salmon or a lot of halibut. My mom loves halibut, and I would cook that a lot. But I was like, no, I'm not going to eat it. And now I'm starting to get my flavor back. I'm starting to enjoy seafood a little bit. I think last month I first had my own crab that I was able to cook in butter. Just going into Pinterest, seeing how pretty food looked, and then actually being able to put it down and then taste it and being like, oh my gosh, it started growing confidence in me with my food. And also a really good connection with how I wanted to eat and how I wanted to cook and how I wanted to share my cooking to other people.
As you were going along, you started cooking pastas. Did anything change after that?
Right now, I'm trying to add in more into my pasta. I just made a fettuccine Alfredo salmon, which I was told was really good. So I tried it and I like it. I'm starting to I really like to culture my food now. If there's something from a different culture that's like, I can get it authentically and make it authentically, I love to try my hardest. There's a new tea that I really like, and it's called Juju-bee tea. However, I had to go to the Asian market to get it because there were specific red dates that you have to have in them, and pears. And I love pears. So I was like, oh my gosh, 2 for 1. And I loved it. So now I start drinking it almost every week.
So what market? We're in Seattle, but what market do you go to?
Oh, I think it's in Redmond. Let me double check. But I love it there. There's not much around me right now. I live more in the Sammamish area, which honestly I kind of like, because when I go shopping for food, it's kind of like shopping for clothes. Like, I'm going to this fancy place. I'm going to go into a totally different culture. I'm expanding my palate. And that's kind of, I think, my favorite thing with cooking with other cultures. I just learned how to create Jollof rice. And oh my gosh, it was so good.
Now,
it was so good.
I haven't heard of that. What is that?
It's an African tradition. And depending on who you ask, one country will say it's Nigeria's, the other will say it's Somalian. Jollof rice is basically rice balls, I guess you would say. And I put them in rice bowls. And it's a dish from West Africa. And you typically put onions, grain rice, tomatoes, vegetables, and a lot of spices, which is probably my favorite, and vegetables and meat in just a pot. And you're just cooking and cooking. And I had it as a side dish, but I loved it. I love side dishes. Those are my favorite.
Do you know, or could you tell us what spices go into it?
I could tell you what we used.
Okay.
We used a lot of turmeric, which is one of my favorites, paprika, tomato powder. I also like to put in tomatoes. So if there's a vegetable powder, I love to put in the actual vegetable. Okay. Tomato powder, onions, bell peppers, red chili pepper. That's number 1. Surprisingly, we put in dried honey, which is really cool to me because I don't know exactly how to mix flavors in together. So the sweet and sour, that's not my biggest strong suit, but I really love playing with it. So dried honey, garlic, salt, bay leaf, thyme, nutmeg, coriander, black pepper, cumin, ginger. And we did have cloves, which I really did like.
Now that sounds really, really good.
Yeah, I love it. I love getting in to see other people's cultured foods and then just eating it. And then if I can make it, that's even better. It's like, I feel like I'm doing more representation in my palate. Sometimes it's typically a lot healthier. I love just adding it in.
That sounds like a very complex dish with a lot of incredible flavor.
It was. I did it with my friend's mom, and we had kind of like a sleepover, and she was like, Olivia, do you want to learn? And I was like, you know what? I would love to.
Oh, that's so amazing.
I would love to learn. Yeah, everyone is super nice up here, but with the culture, it's a little less diverse. Not in Seattle, but where I live in Sammamish. And to be able to come over to a friend's house and have their parents go, I'll show you how to cook this, or I'll bring this food in for you so you can try it at your lunch. It's amazing.
I remember being at a friend's house, and you go to someone's house, and because you're a chef or because you're a cook, they always ask you questions, and they were having a challenge around gravy, making the turkey gravy. And I said, it's so simple. And they're like, well, could you make the gravy? So I ended up showing my friend's mom how to make a good gravy. And we started out very simply with the roux, which is just, it's a mixture of butter and flour, equal parts.
Of course.
And you heat one up and the other one's cold. So you add cold liquid to hot or hot liquid to cold. So you mix the butter and flour, and then you add, like if you're cooking it, you would add cold stock to that and then thicken it. And the trick is, if you do it that way, it never comes out lumpy. And so I would make it with that and some fresh thyme and some onions and shallots and a little bit of garlic. And after it came to a boil, you'd finish it off with some a little bit of white wine, like a white wine shallot reduction. And
Ooh.
it seemed very complicated to them, but it's really a simple method and a series of steps. And if you do it that way, you never have a lumpy gravy. So I gained that reputation with a lot of people. And every time I go to somebody's Thanksgiving dinner, it's like, would you make the gravy? And I end up teaching them how to do it. So the next time they could do it. So when you talk about that exchange, you know, within families and within friends, it's a very powerful thing that people sometimes forget how important it is to pass it on. And so it's really great that she did that with you. Yeah. And speaking of that, are there any chefs that you follow right now?
Oh, well, I have a whole TikTok list, but I'll share generics because a lot of the trends that a lot of chefs are doing on TikTok, it's not just one, it's many. And I think I can share my favorite trend right now is taking fast food and turning it into a gourmet meal. And I think that might be my favorite because it makes me look at ingredients differently. So you'll have they'll bring in a burger and French fries and say, here, give me something. I want it gourmet. I'll pay however much for it. And these chefs are not just they're taking out the buns, but then they're using the buns again. They're using the burger. They try to use everything they can in this dish. And then it just comes out beautifully. And I think that was a really good lesson to learn. Every time I see it, I'm like, oh, well, they could never use that in what they're using. And then he uses it. I find it amazing to see how other chefs can gourmet something or just think about ingredients differently. And that's, I think, one of my favorite trends right now currently.
Is there a specific chef that you follow, or are a lot of people doing this?
Almost every chef I follow has done something like this. It's my favorite thing to see. When it comes to culinary, I really love watching people play with ingredients. And I think it's even cooler when it comes out pretty. It's very aesthetic. I love looking at aesthetic food. To me, healthy, pretty food is aesthetic immediately. So it's really nice to look at it, and it's just amazing what these chefs do. I'm trying to go through my phone right now.
As you're doing that, I remember I'm on Clubhouse, and on Clubhouse, there are chefs from all over the world. And we're going to have a few of those on in the upcoming episodes, actually, in Australia, in the Philippines, I think the UK as well. So I've connected with a bunch of them, and Canada. What I found fascinating is Clubhouse has these rooms where people go and they have conversations because there's no video. It's just audio. What's so interesting about it is that these chefs from all over the world have these conversations, and anyone can come up and join in the conversation. And they were talking about plating food and how the art of plating food, keep it really simple.
Exactly.
And
my favorite.
And it's such an art. And it was so amazing to listen to them describe different strategies about what they do and about how we eat with our eyes. And I just found it really, really interesting. So you kind of just drew that out of me, but I wanted to share that with you and our listeners.
I mean, I think I used to watch this. This is going to be me bringing it back to what TV shows I would watch. But I would watch Gordon Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares.
Yeah.
And then once I got into that, I would sometimes watch, I'm forgetting the name of it, where they have people come in and then they're on specific teams, red and blue teams. Hell's Kitchen. I would watch that a lot. And it would be the simplest thing of how he would plate things. You know, you'd think it'd come out so extravagant and he would be like, no, you don't have to do all that. You just got to do this. And it would look even better. And I would love that. The critiques that he would make on how to make it look that people are looking with their eyes first, and how to make it look that it's simple and classy, but that you really want it and that it just looks good. And I was like, yeah. I really love learning about that.
And it's interesting that you mentioned Gordon Ramsay because many people think that he is, an angry chef, and he's not. Yeah. I have a cousin who met him, and my cousin said he was such a nice guy.
I don't know.
Yeah. And we just signed up for a masterclass. My wife's watching Steve Martin in comedy, but Gordon Ramsay is also on there. So I'm actually looking forward to taking a class with him, a master class. So that should be a lot of fun.
That sounds so exciting.
So moving on, for all of us, the past year or so has been really tough because of COVID and the pandemic and everything. How have you survived the pandemic? How have you coped with it in your life?
A lot did happen during COVID for me. I mean, I was in my freshman year when COVID started. So I think for me at first, let's talk food wise, I never ate, which
Really?
sounds really strange because it was kind of like the discipline was gone. I could chill, I could do whatever I want, but I couldn't go outside. So I was like, oh my gosh, me and my extroverted self, I was just there, like, I can't do anything. And then I started going through my Pinterest again, thinking, wait a minute, I actually have time in my day now to cook what I would want to cook and what I would want to eat for lunch. Because right now my school starts at 7:30, a little too early for me. So I don't get to like cook my lunch sometimes. Sometimes I actually can cook my lunch and I love it. I mean, recently I just made Spam fried rice for me and my friends. It was great, but that was like the first time in like, I think 2 weeks that I've been truly able to cook my lunch. So during COVID, I was like, you know what? I'm taking this opportunity. And I probably shouldn't say this depending on which teachers are listening, but some classes, I would just start cooking my lunch a little extra early. I would go in with salmon pasta. I think I tried Wellington.
Oh.
It didn't work out perfectly, but you know what? I liked it. It was spiced well, but the cooking, I was a little off.
That's a tough dish.
It is. So it just gave me a lot of time. At first I was like, oh, I'm just going to be lazy. I'm just going to chill. And then I realized, oh, wait, this is probably going to be a little bit of a long-term thing. And, you know, my school's still kind of experiencing that in between. And I was like, okay, I have time to cook what I want, do what I want, and not have to worry about going actually into school physically. And that just like sparked an interest in me. I started getting into mixology. I know I talked about that a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
Not with alcohol. There's a place called Mercury's that's actually kind of popular. I'm not exactly sure how many are in Seattle, but I would go there and I would see them doing drinks and they're just so fast. And I think my favorite was an Italian pomegranate soda. I love the flavor pomegranate. And I was watching something. I was like, what if I made a pomegranate balsamic vinegar to go with my salad tonight?
Oh, wow.
I may or may not have spent at least 2 class periods just testing that out, trying it, figuring out how to make it, figuring out what syrup I might need. And it was just great. So it gave me time to practice and it gave me time to eat what I wanted to eat. I'm starting to figure out how to get back into that when we're going back out of school. A lot of meal prep is going into that, but I loved it. It was perfect. Once I started getting the hang of being able to like, okay, I can cook this. It also made my cooking faster. I used to be a really slow cook and now I'm speeding up slowly.
Now you're making me hungry, you know. And
I'm sorry.
It is almost lunchtime, but that's okay. I'm really enjoying learning about your passion for cooking. And you've lived in Seattle for all of your life?
Yeah, most of it. I mean, when I was 5, I lived there till I was 5. I was adopted and they brought us to Seattle and they were like, Seattle's #1. And I was like, yep, okay, I accept it. And then I think when I was like 5 to 6, we moved to Sammamish, which it's close to Seattle, about 45 minutes. But I remember I would constantly be like, no, we have to go back to this place in Seattle. And so now I've kind of made it my mission to make my parents bring me back to Seattle every day. I think my favorite area to go was Pike Place Market. Oh my gosh. The food, seeing the seafood out, I would just have a field day. I didn't even like seafood at the time, but I was like, they're so pretty. I want all of it. The fresh produce. I was in love. It was a field day.
Oh, for sure. It's definitely an amazing experience to walk through Pike Place. And I love for our listeners who may not have done this, and maybe they will in the future, and come to Seattle and watch them throw the fish, because that is a very famous experience.
You have to see it. It's beautiful.
There's a lot to the Pike Place Market. And speaking of Seattle, if I was to visit from, let's say, I don't know, Australia, I have a really good friend in Australia named Jody. And if Jody was to come visit, where would you take her? What 3 places would you take her to?
Well, number 1, I'd have to say Pike Place Market. Number 1, my favorite place, I think I'd also go to a local farmer's market if they're a chef, because I think for me, stores were just like, oh, they're just a store. I'm just going to walk in. I'll just grab something real quickly. But at a market, I could take my time. I could just enjoy the aesthetic of being at a farmer's market, enjoy helping other businesses. I'm a really big farm to table. And
Okay.
I loved that. My mom loves that too. You know, they're like, okay, get your fresh produce now so we can get it for next week. And I love that. So I think Pike Place Market and other like farmers markets, because we have a lot of those.
So what produce do you get at the farmers markets?
Ooh, I'm a fruit person, so it depends on the fruit. I love peaches. I love apples. I love any type of berry that I can cook with recently. I love making my mom smoothies sometimes for breakfast because they're really close and they wake me up. They're very easy. I'm like, okay, what do you want? Let me put it in. Okay, we're good. Oh, what else? I love lettuce. That sounds really weird, but I never really like getting lettuce from my stores. So I'll get lettuce. I'll be like, okay, do I want to have a salad with this? I'll just prepare it now. And then I've got lettuce. Other than that, I also just love looking at communities that are there. A lot of people have pop-up shops. A lot of people, I know sometimes the Sammamish Police Department will come and do some community work, the YMCA. So it's a good thing to know what's in the area and what's trying to reach out to us.
It sounds like you spent a lot of time at farmers markets.
Yes.
You know, my mom was a local artist, Patricia Dugan. She painted lots of different things, but her signature was lighthouses. She would sell them at the Redmond Farmers Market for many, many years. She was part of the Redmond Farmers Market. And so I spent a lot of time there. And I love farmers markets too. And Seattle has some amazing ones. Yeah. So moving on, are there any special projects that you've been involved with cooking or with food?
Oh, one project. I think this might have to be my favorite person in the world. Well, at least favorite chef for now. I don't know if you've heard Ron Finley. He teaches gardening. However, I'm, like I said, a really big person when it comes to farm to table, or at least fresh food being distributed. And I learned about food deserts when I think I knew a little bit about middle school, and I know now more in high school about basically geological differences, but also social differences between classes, and then what food gets distributed to other people. A project that I would love to currently work on still is basically creating easier gardening tools and outreach into communities so that they can make their own food, grow their own food so that they can have it. And then if not for like a specific household, a specific community. Ron Finley is really popular for basically making a gardening system in areas that you would not think gardening would work for specific communities, specifically Black, Latino, X communities. And then basically allowing anyone to come into the garden and take their food as long as they upkeep it. I mean, he teaches gardening, how to make sure everything's watered, and how to work with soil that doesn't work. So I would love to do something like that in Seattle.
That is really, really amazing. So now we're going to move on to one of my favorite parts. And we did a little cooking already along the way, but can you tell me 3 of your favorite signature dishes that you like to cook?
Oh, salmon. I love salmon.
Okay.
That is my favorite thing. Any type of salmon. I know I love seafood boils, and I like to make my salmon for my parents with shrimp as well. I'm kind of an Italian kind of spiced salmon. And then my new favorite is teriyaki salmon. Because my mom loves sushi. And that's my new recent. I'm still kind of getting the feels of it. Little soy sauce, teriyaki. Definitely more of a seafood kind of era I'm kind of in right now. I guess I'll say an original pasta. Specifically red sauce pasta. I love red sauce. I actually learned how to make my own meatballs, which is really cool.
Oh, wow.
So now whenever I get to practice that, I'm like, okay, we're having spaghetti.
That is awesome. And your family is really lucky.
We'll be back after a quick break.
You don't know what to make for dinner again? You want to explore new cuisines, but you don't have time? What if you have new inspirations and we provide you with the ingredients and recipes? We know you want to travel, learn new foods, explore the world, but life's responsibilities keep getting in your way. What if you can bring those experiences to your home neatly packed into a box? Ladyboo Collective is a subscription service that finds real people from around the world to create beautifully curated assortments of recipes, ingredients, and cultural content. Not only do we include cultural ingredients, but also a set of detailed recipe cards with instructions on how to use them. Each box also has a QR code that when scanned takes you to tons more global exploration to immerse yourself in. Everything from film to lifestyle, art to history, it all can be found here. Live your life to the fullest. Subscribe now and don't miss out on the next cultural adventure. Ladyboo Collective. Always exploring.
I mean, sometimes I take it over. My new rule is that if I cook, they have to clean up after me.
You know, that's a very, very good rule because you're really creative and you spend a lot of time in the kitchen and you spend a lot of time planning. I think that's a really good trade-off.
I think it's a great trade-off too.
And since you talk about salmon, in Seattle, we're famous for it because we're in the Pacific Northwest, which is where salmon comes from. You know, we also have Alaska King salmon, which is really amazing. And I think it's Copper River. Copper River salmon in Alaska is famous and is really good. But have you ever tried cedar plank salmon?
I have, and it is so good.
Have you ever made
my
it?
gosh. I have not, which is probably on my list. I love experimenting with salmon. I think my most fun project with salmon was salmon nuggets, which I saw from TikTok. Which is basically chicken nuggets, but they're salmon.
That sounds really good.
I tried a few different ways to cook it, but no, I've never tried that, and I really want to.
Yeah, let me share a little bit, something to try. What's great is you can get cedar planks in Safeway or QFC or the local grocery stores in Seattle, and there's a recipe on the back. But basically, one of the ways you can do it is the key to a cedar plank salmon is that you have to soak the wood so it doesn't burn because you put it on the barbecue. And you put the fish over the barbecue. You can do different things with it, but it's usually like a combination of brown sugar, 5-spice powder, and cinnamon and things like that. And it creates its own sauce as it's grilled. So it's almost like a teriyaki, but it also smokes. You get the smoke from the cedar. It is out of this world. So I'm going to give you that challenge, Olivia, when the summer hits to try it. And I think your family and you will be very excited about it. I got hooked on it.
I definitely will try it.
So that's one I definitely would share. And for our listeners, if you can get salmon, you can definitely get a cedar plank. And it's really simple to do. It's probably 4 or 5 ingredients. But the key is you have to soak the wood so it doesn't burn or catch on fire. And
Yes,
speaking of
too.
Fires, let's move on to a question I ask all our chefs and our friends of Voice for Chefs. Have you ever had a kitchen disaster?
Oh, okay. I'm going to expose myself a little bit.
I was going to say.
Well, I can think of 2 things. One is when I was little, I was growing up, and I advise everyone to try this. My mom had this specific recipe of eggs, and I could never figure out why hers were different. And I used to be so upset. I was like, no, it has to be you, because when I cook my eggs, they burn, which I still have an issue cooking eggs, which is very strange to me, but only if it's her eggs. And her eggs are Canadian bacon, cooked Canadian bacon chopped with eggs, a little bit of salt and pepper, some Mexi cheese. Oh my gosh, that used to be so great. But whenever I cooked it, it would burn every time. And then I can start doing it like how she does it. I still get a little bit. I used to always be like, how do you do it so perfect? There was no residue. There was something on it. I was like, wow. Another one I could say is sometimes when I cook my salmon, I crisp it up a little bit. And I like to do that because my dad loves crunchy salmon somehow. And so I try my best. And then I always set off the alarm. I tend to set off the alarm when I'm sauteing things a lot.
Oh, you mean the smoke alarm?
Mm-hmm. Well, the smoke alarm, it's not totally terrible, but it's like, oh, beep, beep. So we always have to open the window. But then the salmon's good. So...
It's worth it for the food.
It is worth it.
Okay, so here's another question for you. What would be your desert island dish? If you were stuck on a desert island, what would you bring?
Oh, that's so hard. I love a variety. Okay.
You get one.
Just one dish?
Yep, just one dish. Yep.
Do I want to make it a comfort food? I think I'd say one of my favorites is teriyaki salmon with rice, seasoned rice, and asparagus, salted asparagus, and then artichoke as a dessert, which sounds really weird, but I love artichoke, buttered artichoke.
I do too.
So I think I would go for that.
Okay, but what would you bring for dessert?
Dessert.
You get one more.
One more? Ooh, yay. Ooh, I'm going to go for a comfort one. I love fall. I love fall flavors. I love me some apple, some cinnamon.
Okay.
So I think I would go with just my regular apple filling. I call it filling because I'm not the biggest fan of pie. So I take cinnamon, some cinnamon sugar, some lemon juice, some orange juice with apples. I put them in the oven for a little bit on medium heat because I want it to be a little crunchy. And then I will just mix them together and they turn into this apple pie filling sort of. So I think I would bring that. I love that.
And this is your own dish.
Yeah, it's my own dish. When I was little, I remember everyone used to love, because at my other house, we were cooking a lot. And for recipes, they have all these cool recipes. But I remember specifically, they would always love pie. And I was like, you guys, I'm not a big fan of pie. So I'd take the extra apples. I would add in whatever I wanted into my own little concoction. And then I think I perfected my recipe recently. And just every fall, I just put it in a mug sometimes. You can just put your apples in a mug seasoned and just put them in the microwave for a little bit. And it's just happy. I eat it when studying. It was just my own favorite dessert.
So is there anything that you can share with us, with our audience, with me, about what you've learned about cooking? If there's someone out there that might want to really start jumping into cooking, is there any advice you can give?
Oh, any advice? I would say just start. You know, every person's got their own little situation, their own era that they're living in, their own experiences. But with that perspective, I would just cook. I mean, even if you're not totally into cooking, you're like, oh my gosh, it's not my favorite. Do some meal prep. I mean, cooking is meant to be experienced by everyone, whether you're eating it or whether you're actually cooking. And I think just starting would be perfect. And if you're still in quarantine, do it. Take the time of quarantine to get yourself a little bit more on track, or just go above and beyond. I mean, for me, quarantine gave me a lot of time to just say, what are my interests and what aren't? And cooking and mixology came in there. And with that, I was able to get creative. I mean, I was able to say, okay, I know I don't like this, but how can I make this better? I know I haven't tried this, so how can I do it now? And also just practice. I feel like cooking's kind of one of those, you want to have that talent or at least something good for you. And if it comes into like culture, I think experiencing other people's culture, sharing that is just a beautiful thing. So just do it.
Well, as we wrap up today, I wanted to do something really special. So you're 16
Yes.
and you're still young. You have an amazing passion to study cooking and learn about cooking, and you're an incredible cook. And
Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. We've talked a little bit about it, and I know you were thinking about the idea of possibly studying to be a chef, or when you start working to kind of work your way into a kitchen in a country club or something like that. What I want to offer is, if any of our listeners are interested in connecting to Olivia about that, she's got an incredible passion. She is truly talented at cooking, and she knows what she's doing. So how would they reach out to you?
We'll give my email.
Okay.
And it's Olivia, Olivia 05kh@gmail.com. So I'll say that one more time. Olivia, all lowercase letters, 05kh@gmail.com.
I want to thank you for coming on the show today, Olivia. I know that we've been talking about this for a long time, and I'm just really excited that we had a chance to have this conversation.
This was great. I mean, I'm excited to get more in with the cooking community, the food community. It's just great. Thank you for this opportunity.
Absolutely. And I'll leave you with this quote. People who love to eat are always the best people.
Then I guess I'm high up there. Thank you.
You are definitely up there. Thanks for joining us today. Follow us on Facebook. Find our website in the show notes. Subscribe on Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you listen. Leave a comment with 5 stars, and stay tuned for the next episode of Voice for Chefs.